Welcome back to Bold Like a Leopard. The Democrats have already torn themselves to shreds. That's the topic of today's video. We're of course going to go into some of the Trump remarks in reaction to it. I would have done a live stream on this, but honestly, I don't want to wait a few hours before I can get a little more time, so we'll do it now. So before we keep going, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel, and subscribe to me on Minds.com if you haven't already. My screen name there is @ChefLeopard, and on BitChute also @ChefLeopard, and on Gab @Starscream85. And we're going to jump right into this. So Joe Biden made a mistake, a huge mistake, and somebody alerted me to this, but they actually buried it in this article from Politico where he choked up during an Iowa forum. It says, Joe Biden grew emotional, choking on his words and tearing up during a forum here Monday as he described the value of personal caregivers, relating the discussion to the tragedies in his own life. They should be rewarded, compensated for what they do. They're desperately needed, particularly in poor and rural areas, Biden said at an AARP presidential candidate forum here, saying that paid caregivers are not paid very much at all. Now, he went through a lot more stuff about paid caregivers, which is fine, and I think it's a legitimate topic for people to discuss. My mom worked as a caregiver a while after she got ill. It says during the forum, Biden repeatedly related the healthcare conversation to his personal life, bringing up the deaths of his wife and daughter who died in a 1972 car crash and the death of his son, Beau, in 2015. The former vice president also brought up both of his parents who spent time under hospice care in his home. So those are things, obviously, that a candidate would want to highlight. But at the end, and this article really buried it, and I don't have the video yet, so forgive me, but we're going to have to assume that this was the order based on the Political article. But what was really important, what they buried, was this. The exchange came on the same day that Biden rolled out his health care plan. Okay? 1 second. So this is what's really important. That Biden has been, in many ways, kind of waffling on the issue of private health insurance. He's definitely not willing to go over the gorge yet, the same way as some of his other fellow candidates are, and recommend Medicare for all. The exchange came on the same day that Biden rolled out his healthcare plan, which includes adding a public option to the Affordable Care Act. Biden leaned hard into his opponent's embrace of Medicare for all, saying that it would mean unraveling Obamacare, and extolled the benefits of his plan. Well, who would care if you're going to replace Obamacare, honestly? And I'm somebody who opposes Medicare for all. Obamacare has been a disaster. So who cares? Is the point to keep Obamacare because it's Obamacare or because it works? And then he said this: if you like your healthcare plan, your employer-based plan, you can keep it, Biden said. If in fact you have private insurance, you can keep it. That comment was reminiscent of a promise that haunted former President Barack Obama after he declared that under the Affordable Care Act, patients would be able to keep their doctors if they so choose. So Joe Biden is resurrecting the same garbage that he was promoting when he was vice president. He hasn't learned a thing, and he's trying to get people to support a policy that he pushed in 2008 when he was running for vice president with President Obama. They were pushing that public option at the time. He literally you can't teach this old dog new tricks at all. He is unapologetic. He is not adapted to anything. It doesn't matter whether you're left or right. There's really no reason to trust anything Joe Biden says, which gets us to the other end of the spectrum. So this is something that has kind of been eating at me for a few days. So some people are giving a lot of crap to Saykat Chakrabarty, and there's two reasons for it. One is that he uttered a quote to the Washington Post, which is really, that's something that people should really be worried about, where he said, essentially, he asked, Do you think that the real New Deal, the Green New Deal, is about climate change? Because for us, it's about changing the economy. But the other thing that they've been giving him crap about is about this shirt with Subhas Chandra Bose. He's a former Indian nationalist. Passed away over 50 years ago, I believe, and he was a person who had an alliance with the Germans during World War II. Now, I want people to understand a lot of this is basically tinged with this notion that every person who was on the German side during World War II had the same motivation for it. Okay, it says here, Bose enlisted tens of thousands of Indian men to support the Japanese invasion of British India in 1944 and helped fight the British in Europe for Hitler. The Indian Legion Bose raised for Germany trained as a regiment of the SS. He also broadcast propaganda for Hitler on a radio network set up by Bose to encourage Indians to fight for freedom. Bose met with Hitler in Germany in 1942. The Jewish Journal quoted an office bearer of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, which fights anti-Semitism across the world, who demanded an apology from Chakrabarty for the Bose T-shirt. So I want to say this very, clearly. I'm not going to tell people that Subhas Chandra Bose was a good man or whatever, but I don't think you can lump him in with Nazis the same way, for example, that the Grand Mufti is, he's remembered. The Grand Mufti of Palestine, who was the religious authority of Muslims in the British Mandate of Palestine, was explicitly trying to help the Germans because he saw a Jewish British domination of his country, and he wanted the Jews out of his country first of all. And he also was in favor of the German extermination of them. The issue with Subhas Chandra Bose is a little different, and you can even see here that the president of India, and this, granted, this could be a little controversial. But he inaugurated in January a museum to Bose at Red Fort to mark the leader's 122nd birthday. Modi also tweeted his homage to Bose on his birth anniversary on Wednesday. Modi declared, "I bow to Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose on his Jayanti. He was a stalwart who committed himself toward ensuring India is free and leads a life of dignity. We are committed to fulfilling his ideals and creating a strong India." So people have to be conscious that, even if you look at World War II, there were plenty of Axis countries that were a little bit more, they were on the side of the Germans. For example, Finland. Okay, Finland was on the German side because they wanted the Soviets to be warded off. The Soviets were trying to reconquer Finland because Finland had been a possession of the Russian Empire before World War I. You can make the same claim about Ukraine, even though Ukraine, let's be honest, also the Ukrainian people were very complicit in a number of the atrocities the Germans committed against Jews and Poles. But the motivation is what really is the key. If the motivation was explicitly the same as what the Nazis themselves were trying to do, which was to create these racial societies that were essentially hierarchical and eliminate minorities, yeah, I think there would definitely be grounds to attack Subhas Bose and by extension people who wear his shirt. But Chakrabarty, I don't think that he was doing the same thing. Bose, in fact, if I remember correctly, he is known as the first person to try to get Indian Muslims, Hindus, and Sikhs to fight together under the same flag for independence. It doesn't mean you have to support him, but I don't think that you can smear him as a Nazi the same way that you would with other figures from World War II. And look, I think that my voice is a bit, it's kind of like yelling into the whirlpool, or whatever you call it, when people don't really hear a voice of calmness in the maelstrom. But that's the truth, and I don't feel that we have to just go along with these portrayals just because this person happens to believe in ideas that are themselves, completely crazy. The Green New Deal and a lot of his domestic policy. Next issue is Beto O'Rourke, and this is an Onion parody, but it's not far off. So Beto O'Rourke has admitted, unprompted, that his ancestors were slave owners, and that his wife's ancestors were slave owners. So now the Onion's making fun of him because, saying he admits his family was responsible for the My Lai massacre and the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. So he is, and he also, including a cousin who piloted the Hindenburg and his maternal great aunt, Typhoid Mary Milan, who was the original vector for the deadly disease. So yeah, we're talking about Beto O'Rourke, and this is a parody article again from the Onion. Look, the apology tour is continuing, and it's not going to help Beto O'Rourke. This picture is the perfect image of Beto for the public, because this is exactly how he behaves. This is the way that he sees his his path to glory by basically self-flagellating. If you see Gad Saad's videos on him, where essentially he's whipping himself, and like he was on The View, yeah, he's a bitch. And finally, we get to this, which of course is this is the top story of the day: Trump versus the Squad.
Hey, that's a very racist statement. I'm surprised you'd say that. John, go ahead. Well, they're very unhappy. I'm watching them. All they do is complain. So all I'm saying is, if they want to leave, they can leave, John. They can leave. I mean, I look at Omar. I don't know. I never met her. I hear the way she talks about Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda has killed many Americans. She said, you can hold your chest out. When I think of America, when I think of Al-Qaeda, I can hold my chest out. When she talked about the World Trade Center being knocked down, some people, you remember the famous some people. These are people that, in my opinion, hate our country. Now, you can say what you want, but get a list of all of the statements they've made. And all I'm saying that if they're not happy here, they can leave. They can leave, and you know what? I'm sure that there'll be many people that won't miss them. But they have to love our country. They're Congress people, and I never used any names. But these are people, quiet. These are people that if they don't like it here, they can leave. And I don't know who's going to miss them, but I guess some people will. One of them is polling at 8%. One of them is polling at 8%. So when I hear people speaking about how wonderful Al-Qaeda is, when I hear people talking about some people with the World Trade Center, some people, no, not some people, much more than some people. When I hear the statements that they've made, and in one case you have somebody that comes from Somalia, which is a failed government, a failed state, who left Somalia, who ultimately came here, and now is a congresswoman who's never happy, says horrible things about Israel, hates Jews. It's very simple. And if the Democrats want to wrap their bows around this group of 4 people, one of them kept Amazon out of New York, tens of thousands of jobs, would have been a great thing. And she kept Amazon from going, would have been a good deal. I mean, could he have made better? Maybe. But tens of thousands of jobs. And New York has not been the same since that happened. It's really hurt New York and New York City. Amazon was going to go. They were going to relocate a major section of their business in New York. She kept them out. That was a terrible thing she did. Thing she did. So here's the story. I see them complaining. They're complaining constantly. I watched Lindsey Graham today on Fox and Friends talking about the same subject, and frankly, even stronger than what I'm saying. He said they're communists. I'm saying that They're socialists, definitely. As to whether or not they're communists, I would think they might be. But this isn't what our country is about. Nevertheless, they're free to leave if they want. And if they want to leave, that's fine. And if they want to stay, that's fine. But the people have to know. And politicians can't be afraid to take them on. A politician that hears somebody where we're at war with Al-Qaeda and sees somebody talking about how great Al-Qaeda is, pick out her statement. That was Omar. How great Al-Qaeda is. When you hear that, and we're losing great soldiers to Al-Qaeda, when you see the World Trade Center gets knocked down, and you see the statements made about the World Trade Center, all the death and destruction, I'll tell you what, I'm not happy with them. And it's very easy to be say, oh, gee, well, it's okay. If weak politicians want to say, and the Democrats in this case, if they want to gear their wagons around these four people, I think they're going to have a very tough election, because I don't think the people of the United States will stand for it.
All right, so that was a little chaotic, and of course the question that I cut off at the beginning was they'd asked him, what about Pelosi's statement that what Trump really wants to do is make America white again? Well, what he did was, I guess, a masterful job of kind of recalibrating the conversation and using it to continue to put the pressure on the opposition. And this is why, okay? Saying things like he did, some of the things he said were, I guess, risky. For example, accusing them of hating Israel and hating Jews. Well, I'll tell you why that's a risk, because a lot of Americans don't care about that. It's just true. And I know a lot of people who either don't care about that, or they themselves would probably, you could say, they are very critical of Israel themselves. But this is Donald Trump showing that he's committed to an issue, okay? You don't have to agree with Donald Trump about the Israel-Palestine issue or his relationship with the Jews, but people are starting to realize that he's unusually committed to that, which is something that they can't say about other politicians. You see people like Schumer and Pelosi, they're a little bit on the fence about that on one side or the other, and he seems to be very consistent on that. And I think people admire consistency, as at least people that are on a certain side support consistency. People who are pro-Palestinian support people who are consistently pro-Palestinian, and people who are pro-Israel support people that are pro-Israel consistently. The issue that is really out front with this statement is that he's rejecting any of their criticisms of him, and he's not apologetic. And that's what's really bothering them, that if this was, for example, someone like President Bush or Paul Ryan or Marco Rubio, or somebody who had a weaker constitution, personal constitution, that's what I'm trying to say, they would likely have walked back their comments and apologized. And it just is not happening with Donald Trump. He's just ratcheting it up and throwing more chips onto the table. And they can't handle it. And they had a press conference later in the day that was nothing but Trump is mean, and he hates us, and he's racist, and impeach, 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 impeach. And that's exactly the reaction that Trump wants out of them. And that's really the point here. The point is not really what's being said. The issue is, what type of reaction can Trump get out of people? And I think that, look, I don't know if he's really thinking, while he's on the bench in the plane, he's taking Air Force One, and maybe he's sitting on one of those benches or one of the fine seats they have there, and he's thinking, oh, what can I get them to do next? I don't know if that's the way he thinks, but you could probably make the conclusion that it crosses his mind what he thinks other people's reactions to what he's going to do are, and then how to get them to make the best mistake. And the issue right now is that the Democrats are a divided party. You have people who are from the establishment, like Joe Biden, who are recycling old garbage that nobody cares about. Nobody wants a public option and a promise that you can keep your plan, when this is what he promised when he was running in 2008. So nobody's going to pay attention to Joe Biden, and if they are, they're probably going to notice how dated and ridiculous his campaign is. As for the other candidates, they're struggling to get attention. You have Beto coming out and trying to say, oh, my ancestors did this, Nobody cares about your ancestors. You're running for it to be yourself. Okay, so sometimes during a campaign, people's ancestors come up. For example, I remember Bush's his grandfather was accused of being a war profiteer or selling arms to the Germans or something. And ultimately, that doesn't really matter in the present. There's plenty of problems that you could probably attest that George Bush himself has, or that Barack Obama has. Some of those things are just plain distraction. So why would you bring it up yourself, like Beto O'Rourke did? And then, as for the moderate candidates, the ones who really need attention, you have people like Tim Ryan, and Ryan is a congressman from my area of the country, pretty close to where I used to work, and he's basically scratching bottom. He's raised less than $1 million for his presidential bid, and he still thinks that people are going to take an interest in his campaign. In fact, let's look at a few of these comments. It says here, little Jimmy just wants the words formal. Little Timmy just wants the words former presidential candidate on his resume when he applies for a lobbyist job in the future. This person says, I like Ryan and I think he is a good congressman, but at least Kasich carried Ohio, and I doubt if Ryan can duplicate that. He should support Trump and ask to be the Secretary of Labor and push for a Marshall Plan for our Rust Belt states to improve. So you have union voters basically saying, no, he has no chance here. A Ryan article was okay, but I thought the president came to town yesterday, and if there was an article on him, I missed it. It seemed strange that there was no article, and people are complaining that there's articles. This is in my hometown paper. There's articles on Gillibrand speaking to 30 people and Ryan raising chump change. So yeah, I think that we're definitely talking about a dwindling window for the Democrats to catch up to Donald Trump. And if I were somebody who was betting on the presidential election campaign today, even if you're talking about the Democrats having a chance to win, who's really sticking out? You see, Sanders himself is kind of just drifting away and letting Warren get ahead of him. You see people like Gabbard who make great appearances on TV, but they don't seem to be gaining any momentum, at least not according to the polling. And I know I'm not one to trust the polling blindly, but still. So who is going to beat Trump if he's so unpopular? Because these people just can't seem to get their heads above water. That's about it. Once again, please like, share, and subscribe. Also subscribe to me on BitChute and on Minds.com. Those are both at Chef Leopard. You can also find me on Gab at Starscream85 and on Parler at Razor Ray. Fresh on, sensual, tender, smooth.